tax cuts for folks making $500 or $700 or $800 or $900,000 a year, and gives more tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires, and raises taxes on middle-class families, and then has no cuts in it, which is what he says he wants, doesn't make much sense. I mean, let's just think about the logic for a second. They're thinking about voting for raising taxes, at least on folks over $1 million, which they say they don't want to do, but they're going to reject spending cuts that they say they do want to do. That defies logic. There's no explanation for that. I think that any objective person out there looking would say that we put forward a very balanced plan, and it's time for us to go ahead and get it done. That's what the country needs right now, because I think folks have been through some wrenching times. We're still recovering from a very tough recession. And what they're hoping for is a sense of stability, focus, compromise, common sense over the next couple of years. And I think we can provide it, but this is a good test for it. Okay? Carol Lee.
Okay.
There you go.
Just to follow on Ben's question, what is your next move? Are we in a position now where you're just waiting for the speaker to make a move? Because you're set.
Well, I'm going to reach out to all the leaders involved over the next couple of days and find out what is it that's holding this thing up. What is holding it up? If the argument from Republicans is we haven't done enough spending cuts, that argument is not going to fly, because we've got close to $1 trillion of spending cuts. And when you add interest, then it's more than $1 trillion in spending cuts. If the argument is that they can't they can't increase tax rates on folks making $700,000 or $800,000 a year, that's not a persuasive argument to me, and it's certainly not a persuasive argument to the American people. It may be that members of their caucus haven't looked at exactly what we've proposed. It may be that if we provide more information, or there's greater specificity, or we've worked through some of their concerns, that we can get some movement there. But the fact of the matter is that what would violate my commitment to voters is if I ended up agreeing to a plan that put more of the burden on middle-class families and less of a burden on the wealthy in an effort to reduce our deficit. That's not something I'm going to do. What would violate my commitment to voters would be to put forward a plan that makes it harder for young people to go to college, that makes it harder for a family with a disabled kid to care for that kid. And there's a threshold that you reach where the balance tips, even in making compromises that are required to get something done in this town, where you are hurting people in order to give another advantage to folks who don't need help. And we had an extensive debate about this for a year. And not only does the majority of the American people agree with me, about half of Republican voters agree with me on this. So, at some point there's got to be, I think, a recognition on the part of my Republican friends that take the deal. They will be able to claim that they have worked with me over the last 2 years to reduce the deficit more than any other deficit reduction package. That we will have stabilized it for 10 years. That is a significant achievement for them. They should be proud of it. But they keep on finding ways to say no as opposed to finding ways to say yes. And I don't know how much of that just has to do with, it is very hard for them to say yes to me. But at some point, they've got to take me out of it and think about their voters. and think about what's best for the country. And if they do that, if they're not worried about who's winning and who's losing, do they score a point on the president? Did they extract that last little concession? Did they force him to do something he really doesn't want to do, just for the heck of it? And they focus on actually what's good for the country. I actually think we can get this done.
You mentioned the 700, 800,000. Are you willing to move on income level, and are there specific things that you would do?
I'm not going to get into specific negotiations here. My point is simply, Carol, that if you look at Speaker Boehner's proposal and you look at my proposal, they're actually pretty close. They keep on saying that somehow we haven't put forward real spending cuts. Actually, there was, I think, a graph in the New York Times today that showed, they're the same categories, right? There's a little bit of tweaks here and there. There's a few differences, but we're right there. And on the revenue side, there's a difference in terms of them wanting to preserve tax breaks for folks between $250,000 and $1 million that we just can't afford. I mean, keep in mind, I'm in that income category. I'd love to, not pay as much in taxes, but I also think it's the right thing to do for us to make sure that people who have less, people who are working, people who are striving, people who are hoping for their kids, that they have opportunity. That's what we campaigned about. That's what we talked about. And this is not a situation where I'm, unwilling to compromise. This is not a situation where I'm trying to, rub their face in anything. I mean, I think anybody who looks at this objectively would say that coming off my election, I have met them at least halfway in order to get something done for the country. And so I noticed that there were a couple of headlines out there saying, we're now in the land of political posturing, and it's the usual he said atmosphere. But look at the facts. Look at where we started. Look at where they started. My proposal is right there in the middle. We should be able to get this done. Let's get it done. We don't have a lot of time. Carrie. There you are.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah.
What is your level of confidence that if you are able to reach a comprehensive deal with the Speaker, that he will be able to bring his members on board and get it passed? Essentially, do you still trust Speaker Boehner in this process?
There is no doubt that the Speaker has challenges in his caucus, and I recognize that. I'm often reminded when I speak to the Republican leadership that the majority of their caucus's membership come from districts that I lost. And so sometimes they may not see an incentive in cooperating with me, in part because they're more concerned about challenges from a Tea Party candidate or challenges from the right, and cooperating with me may make them vulnerable. I recognize that. But goodness, if this past week has done anything, it should just give us some perspective. I mean, if there's one thing we should have after this week, it should be a sense of perspective about what's important. And, I would like to think that members of that caucus would say to themselves, you know what, we disagree with the president on a whole bunch of things. We wish the other guy had won. We're going to fight him on a whole range of issues over the next 4 years. We think his philosophy is all screwed up. But right now, what the country needs is for us to compromise, get a deficit reduction deal in place, make sure middle-class taxes don't go up, make sure that we're laying the foundations for growth, give certainty to businesses large and small, not put ourselves through some sort of self-inflicted crisis every 6 months, allow ourselves time to focus on things like preventing the tragedy in Newtown from happening again, focus on issues like energy and immigration reform and all the things that will really make a determination as to whether our country grows over the next 4 years, 10 years, 40 years. And if you just pull back from the immediate political battles, if you kind of peel off the partisan war paint, then we should be able to get something done. And I think the Speaker would like to get that done. I think an environment needs to be created within not just the House Republican Caucus, but also among Senate Republicans to say the campaign's over, and let's see if we can do what's right for the country, at least for the next month. And then, we can re-engage in all the other battles that they'll want to fight.
If you don't get it done, the Republicans have said they'll try to use the debt limit as a next pressure point. We'll negotiate with them in that context.
No. And I've been very clear about this. This is the United States of America, the greatest country on earth, the world's economic superpower, and the idea that we lurch from crisis to crisis, and every 6 months or every 9 months that we threaten not to pay our bills on stuff we've already bought and default and ruin the full faith and credit of the United States of America. That's not how you run a great country. So I've put forward a very clear principle. I will not negotiate around the debt ceiling. We're not going to play the same game that we saw happen in 2011, which was hugely destructive, hurt our economy, provided more uncertainty to the business community than anything else that happened. And I'm not alone in this. If you go to Wall Street, including talking to a whole bunch of folks who spent a lot of money trying to beat me, they would say it would be disastrous for us to use the debt ceiling as a cudgel to try to win political points on Capitol Hill. So we're not going to do that, and which is why I think that part of what I hope over the next couple of days we see is a recognition that there is a way to go ahead and get what it is that you've been fighting for. These guys have been fighting for spending cuts. They can get some very meaningful spending cuts. This would amount to $2 trillion in spending cuts over the last couple of years. And in exchange, they're getting a little over $1 trillion in revenue. And that meets the pledge that I made during the campaign, which was $2 to $2.50 of spending cuts for every revenue increase. And that's an approach that I think most Americans think is appropriate. But I will not negotiate around the debt ceiling. We're not going to do that again.
Can I ask a question about Newtown, please?
Yes. I've got David Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Getting back to the gun issue, you alluded to the fact that Washington commissions don't have the greatest reputation in the world. What makes you think this was going to be different, given the passage of time and the political power of gun rights groups like the National Rifle Association?
Well, this is not going to be a commission. Joe is going to gather up some key cabinet members who have an interest in this issue. We're going to reach out to a bunch of stakeholders. We're going to be reaching out to members of Congress who have an interest in this issue. It's not as if we have to start from scratch.